Let's get into main topic number 1, shall we? And our first main topic today gets submitted to us by Jason Aguilar, who writes, "Hey, John. So someone on the cast of Suicide Squad, that'll be Joel Kinnaman, said the movie is heavily R-rated. Do you think this is a good idea box office-wise, or do you think it's a risky gamble considering the flop of Birds of Prey?" All right, thanks a lot for sending that in, man. And yes, there was recently, Joel Kinnaman was recently being interviewed. I think it might have been with Entertainment Weekly. I can't remember, but Joel Kinnaman was being interviewed and he was talking about, and he said, he's just talking about how hilarious this script is, how incredible he found it. And one of the key things he said was, it's so R heavy. It is so R heavy. This is the exact same he said. This comes to us from MovieWeb, writes, Joel Kinnaman is heaping praise on James Gunn and the Suicide Squad, noting that every page of the script made him laugh. The Suicide Squad is quote unquote heavily R-rated and insane, according to Rick Flag actor Joel Kinnaman. James Gunn shared the first footage of the highly anticipated movie at the DC fandom event back in August. DC fans were blown away by what they saw. Now they want more. All right. Thanks a lot for sending in the question about this. And that's basically where we're at. And yeah, Joel Kinnaman's coming out and saying this thing, crazy R-rated, crazy hilarious, all that kind of stuff. Now you raise a very good question. You know, DC just did this Harley Quinn Birds of Prey movie that a lot of people like, and all due respect to everybody who does. It's all subjective. If you like it, that's awesome. I did not. To me, it was the first DC movie, in the DCU era that I didn't like. I like all the other ones, but this was the first one I didn't like. And it was R-rated. The funny thing about Birds of Prey, though, is, and this was one of my biggest observations on it, Rob, was that Birds of Prey didn't need to be rated R. Like, even when you watched it, it's like, it really felt like they intentionally just threw in a couple of F-bombs just so they could get the R rating and say, look, kids, look how cool we must be. We have an R. Ooh. You know, because otherwise I felt like if they didn't try to do it on purpose, I felt like they would have submitted that to the MPA and they just would have got a PG-13. Whatever, be that as it may. Yes, they stumbled a little bit on that R rating. But they also recently did another R-rated DC property, Joker. And that one made $1 billion and got them nominated for Best Picture at the Academy Awards. One of the things that we're saying on the show all the time is that R doesn't mean anything. An R rating does not, contrary to what some dumb people believe, R does not make your movie better. R does not make your movie worse. A rating is simply what suits whatever this movie is, right? So it's like anything else. If this movie is really best suited for a PG or a G rating, then that's just making it what will help it fulfill its own identity. If it's not, then trying to go anything harder or trying to go anything softer is a disservice to the property. You take a movie like Deadpool, that was a movie where it could have been fine as a PG-13. I said all along, Deadpool could be fine as a PG-13, but its real identity is really R-rated. And so if you go for that, then just fit it in there. That's all it is. When we look at that footage that James Gunn revealed at DC Fandom, I was just overwhelmed with the sense of, this is an R-rated movie. This has got to be an R-rated movie. It looked like King Shark was about to devour a living human being and rip him in half. I mean, this has got to be rated R. And so if the nature of the film is rated R, then don't neuter it to get it down to PG-13. If your film was naturally PG-13, throw in some boobs and a couple more F-bombs so we can get that R rating so everybody will think we're cool. Don't do that either. But if the film that the filmmaker has come up with and presented, if its true identity is R-rated, go for it and make it as such. Rob, I'm not surprised to hear Joel Kinnaman say this because after what we saw at DC Fandom, it just really felt like this was going to be an R-rated project. I can't imagine it not being. So this makes sense to me. You read his comments and heard about what he said. What's your thoughts?
It's called Suicide Squad. I mean, you got a group of people that are going on missions where they're probably going to die. And I think the very definition of what Suicide Squad is, especially if you lean into it, it's either going to, I mean, making it heavily R-rated seems like the right thing to do, especially when you're dealing with someone like James Gunn. I think that, and look, DC not having a bad run with R-rated superhero fare, or supervillain fare, and Suicide Squad's kind of a combination of both. So I think that it's to be expected. But like you pointed out, a rating really doesn't mean anything. To me, a rating doesn't have any. Would people say that Back to the Future would have been better if it was rated R? I don't think so. I mean, I think that a rating has to deal with more about what the subject matter is. What best serves the subject matter? And I think for somebody who has the kind of irreverent personality that James Gunn does, if you look at a Super or a Slither or even Tromeo and Juliet, James Gunn has a very irreverent sense of humor. And you put that together with guns and supervillains, I think you're going to run away with it, and it's going to be R-rated, and it's going to be delightfully and fun and delicious for all of us. So I think what you're looking for is the right rating, as you pointed out, for the right subject matter. And I think an R-rated Suicide Squad that James Gunn's directing, I think it's good for everybody all around, but most especially the audience.
Yeah, now look, we point this out all the time. Hearing Joel Kinnaman talk about how every page made me laugh hysterically, it's heavily rated R, blah, blah. We bring this up all the time, but it should be mentioned every time. Joel Kinnaman is one of the cast members of this movie. So what else is he supposed to say? That, I read James Gunn's script and it bored me to death. So you got to take it with a grain of salt. Do take it with a grain of salt. But it really did seem to me, Rob, like, I'm not saying the cast of Wonder Woman didn't have a good time making Wonder Woman. I'm not suggesting that at all. But when you watch the Wonder Woman panel on the first day of DC fandom, like last month, it seemed rather uptight. It seemed a little uptight. It seemed a little formal. It seemed a little stiff, and you're talking about some screen like veterans like Chris Pine and everything in there. I got to say, the standout, the person who surprised me that really felt the most natural in there and really made it enjoyable watching was actually Gal Gadot. Like she's just, when it comes to just letting her personality take something over, she's actually great. I would want her promoting my movie any day of the week.
Yeah.
But when you watched the Suicide Squad panel, it legitimately, honestly felt like every single, and there was a lot of people on camera for that panel, but it honestly felt like every single one of them was filled with joy to be talking to all their other cast members about this movie. It just seemed like they all had a ripping good time making this film. And listen, there are a lot of movies that are some of the best of all time that were nightmares for the people involved making it. I'm not saying you have to have fun in order for it to be a good movie, but when you're making a movie like this, if your whole cast is having a blast, I think that speaks well to it. Am I looking a little bit too much into that? But I honestly think that Kinnaman really did love this thing, and maybe I'm just reading too much in that panel, but what do you think about that?
No, I think you're absolutely right. I think, again, these actors probably had a ball making this movie. Look at the behind the scenes footage they showed at Fandom. There's explosions going off. They're storming the beach. I mean, they're like kids in a candy store. It looks so much fun, whatever it is that they're doing, and I think it's infectious. And when there's, it really depends. I mean, I've been on a number of different movie sets over the years, and movie sets can be very different in terms of the tone of what's happening. They can be very serious. Like, believe it or not, even though there was a lot of fun and kids on it, the set of Chronicles of Narnia, Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe was a pretty serious set because there was a lot of technology involved and a lot of prosthetics and big effects and things like that. So it wasn't that loose when they were shooting. But I've been on other sets where it was much looser. You wouldn't think. And I think Suicide Squad, that plays into what they're doing. When you have a lot of larger than life villains with a lot of swagger and bravado, I'm sure the set was hilarious to be on. And then you have James Gunn setting the tone, and I'm sure he wanted that kind of energy, and it's gonna bleed through the screen to all of us, which is great.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to that. Question is for you guys. You had a chance to read Joel Kinnaman's comments. What do you make of them? Do you assume, like the rest of us, that yes, this is clearly going to be an R-rated thing, and that footage just made it look like it naturally should be? How do you feel about it? Jump into the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right, guys.